The biggest question is how healthy is Mike Conley? And everybody says, hey, he's day to day with a hamstring. Well, so is James Harden. We saw how that worked out. So the biggest question I have right now, Jake, is can the Utah Jazz beat the LA Clippers if Mike Conley's not at his best?
I don't necessarily think that they can. I think that they really need Mike Conley to be in the game, and I think it's so important to have Donovan Mitchell off the ball as much as possible, so that you can put him in the best position possible to score and score at a high rate. I think that you can rely on Donovan Mitchell to give you 30, even 40 in the postseason. But at the same time, when you take away a talent like Mike Conley off the floor, that changes things. That changes the dynamic. That changes what the Clippers have to do defensively to stop you. And I just think that the loss of Mike Conley is huge. It is definitely a series-defining thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Mike Conley plays, the Jazz are in great shape. They're in the exact same shape that they were against the Grizzlies. Now, the Clippers are obviously a much better team than the Memphis Grizzlies are, but my point it just is that if Donovan Mitchell has to bring the ball up, this series is not going to be easy for the Jazz on any level.
Yeah, and the thing that really stands out to me is Mike Conley's quality. He does a lot of things very well. He may not be elite at any one thing, but he shoots the three really well. He defends really well. He distributes really well. He facilitates really well. He defends really well. And without him at 100%, when you're banging a hamstring and you're struggling with your mobility, it takes away from all of those things. The other thing I think we've seen is that when Mike Conley's not available to you or isn't playing regular minutes, it puts other guys in difficult situations. It means more Oni. It means Joe Ingles starting. It means point jingles, which I think all of us recognize means we're not going to get the best out of Joe Ingles. So I absolutely think that this is a difference maker for the Utah Jazz. And I think if Mike Conley is not as 100% that he can be 100% and stuff, I don't see any way they beat the LA Clippers.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern with the Clippers, though, is that they've shown a lot of inconsistency. Like, I think, we were talking in the pre-show behind-the-scenes meeting about the fact that, that the Clippers, took the Mavericks for granted, that the Clippers felt like, they were just better and that this would be a 5, maybe a 6-game series, and then obviously it goes 7. And so, yes, I think the Clippers are awake now. Yes, I think the Clippers have finally showed up. But my question just simply is, are we going to see the same inconsistencies from the Clippers against the Jazz that they showed us against the Mavericks? I would think that they wouldn't be taking the Utah Jazz, the number 1 seed, the best team in the NBA, for granted. Certainly they wouldn't be. But at the same time, I think we all know that the Clippers have this propensity to just turn off for, quarters at a time, where they just are not the same productive team that we have known them to become. So I guess my thing just is that in this series, I don't even think this is about the Jazz. I really don't. I think the Clippers will decide this series. And what I mean is that the Clippers, if they play their best basketball, in my opinion, can beat the Jazz, and they can beat them consistently. However, we rarely see the Clippers playing their best basketball, and most of the time we see them being this not mediocre, but just not being the team that they should be. That's the most frustrating part about them. That they're not living up to their potential.
Yeah, I firmly believe the Clippers are going to win this series. I think the things that stand out to me is, I watched pretty much all of that Dallas series because I don't have a life and I obsess over basketball this time of year. And I look at the LA Clippers as a team who took the Dallas Mavericks very lightly. But I also look at that as a team that won, 4 out of the last 5 games. And they took that, very seriously. And when you win 4 of 5, 3 of 4, I guess it would be 3 of the final 4 games from the Dallas Mavericks. And I understand that the Mavericks are a horribly flawed team. I get that. They are Luka Doncic and everybody else. But I look at the LA Clippers, and I saw a lot of things that scare me if I'm a Jazz fan. Obviously what Reggie Jackson did. I mean, you look at the couple of shots that he hit last night in that game or yesterday in that game. Those are huge three-pointers he hit. Marcus Morris is absolutely an elite three-point shooter right now. And really, the LA Clippers are one of the best, if not the best, three-point shooting team in the NBA. And that's coming to town now. I also look at it that they can play many different styles of basketball. I don't think they rely on the outside game, the inside game. The one Achilles heel that we've seen all year from the Utah Jazz is teams that can get into the paint and hit the mid-range, the elbow jumper, the free throw line jumper. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George make a living doing that. Now, is it going to be easy? No, I think this is going to be a long, grueling series. But you know what else I see? Is that the Clippers can absolutely handle Donovan Mitchell. Superstars like Don are going to get his, right? The question is, who else is going to step up? This brings me back to my original point of how healthy is Mike Conley? Because I'm telling you, Kawhi Leonard and Donovan Mitchell are going to spend a lot of time together. And what did you see? By the way, I thought this was a really important point. What you saw in Game 6 and 7 was Luka Doncic struggle in the second half. And why did that happen? Because the Clippers stopped switching. And you saw a lot of times that Kawhi Leonard stayed on Luka Doncic, did not switch through the pick and roll. And Luka was not able to get clean looks. You saw a lot of those high-arcing shots. Now, they went in, but again, great scorers are going to get theirs. They shut everybody else down. They made life very difficult for Tim Hardaway Jr. Very clearly, Rick Carlisle lost confidence in Brunson in this series. Porzingis was a zero. The Jazz need somebody else to step up. Now, you know Jordan Clarkson's going to get his 20 a game. But who's going to be that next guy? Mm-hmm. That's my biggest question in this series.
Well, and I think you can draw a lot of comparisons between the Mavericks and the Jazz on the offensive end. I look at Porzingis, like you were just saying, that he was basically zero in this series. I look at Rudy on the offensive end, and I say, yeah, Rudy does not have big offensive games unless the Jazz are building a brick wall from three. So if the Jazz are making their shots, Rudy's going to be, he's not going to be a big deal on offense. And so I think for the Clippers, they're going to find ways to essentially mitigate Rudy Gobert. And what I mean is they're going to say, okay, the five of us on defense understand that there's really only one true threat that we have to be scared of on the floor, and that's Donovan Mitchell. And everybody else is just, is just a role player for this team. Because that's really what it turns into, if you think about it. If Conley's not on the floor, if Conley's hurt, he's not playing in these game one or maybe even game two. If he's not playing, it's Don and everybody else. And so what does that look like? It looks like a lot of pick and roll with Rudy Gobert, and it looks like Donovan Mitchell either finishing or kicking. So I think if you're the Clippers, you feel good about your chances in this series, but I think it really just comes down to, like it has all season long, are the Jazz going to shoot 50% from three as a team? If they do that, they're going to win the game. If they don't do that, they're not going to win the game. And my feeling is that the Clippers are not going to allow the Jazz to stand around and get open looks. And that's what I'm really worried about.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that you have to really consider in this series is the value of the mid-range game to the Utah Jazz. How important, how much do they value, how much mid-range will you get? Because I think Donovan Mitchell is a very good mid-range player. Mm-hmm. It is a big part of his arsenal. How much do they value it? How much are we going to see from Bojan Bogdanovic in this series? One of the things that really bothered me in the Memphis series was I felt like the Jazz got away from leveraging Bogdanovic on the block, and his attacking the basket game really was limited. Now, his three ball looked really good in the Memphis series, but he didn't shoot that in volume.
Yeah.
And the question is, can Bojan Bogdanovic step back up into a premier role and, hit a switch, I guess, because, again, I think anything you get offensively out of Rudy Gobert in this series is a gift. Mm-hmm. Because I think we also saw that, the Clippers have a size problem, but that is really mitigated by guys like Rudy Gobert who are not an offensive threat. But what we saw was Boban really comfortable on the block, playing an important role at times, but they were also defending Boban with, Kawhi Leonard. That they didn't take Boban seriously. You have to pay a lot more attention to Rudy Gobert. And the fact is that rebounding probably will determine who wins and loses this series. Whoever has the rebounding advantage, in my opinion, Jake, probably wins and loses because both of these teams shoot the three in volume.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we saw in that last game that they played against each other is we saw that the game was very even, and it came right down to it. And when it came right down to it, the athleticism of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George took over, and they rebounded the hell out of the ball in clutch time in the last 5 minutes of the game, and that did end up deciding the series. So, at the end of the day, I just think that the formula is very simple, man. You cannot have a lot of turnovers. You need to shoot the three-point shot at a really high rate.
Yeah, and efficiently.
Yeah, and I do agree with you that I think that the Bogdanovich factor has to be high in this series. You've got to get him to a point in this series where he matters. The Clippers defense has to be forced to say, okay, we've got to respect Bogey on the block, because what that does for the Jazz then is that forces the Clippers to collapse sooner, and that's going to allow you to get the ball movement and the rotation around the arc that we all love to watch.
Well, but I think you also have to recognize that the Los Angeles Clippers have two elite defenders on the perimeter.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, who are lockdown defenders. They are, we just watched it happen in Dallas. The thing that you have to do is you have to keep them on their back foot. You cannot allow the Clippers, if you're the Utah Jazz, you cannot allow Kawhi Leonard to have those momentum-shifting dunks. You cannot allow them to attack the basket.
Mm-hmm.
The problem becomes that they shoot the three so well that you have to almost have a foot on the stripe to defend that three ball, and all that does is open up the paint. And again, one of the things obviously that we're going to see in this series a lot, and I think you're going to see it right out of the gate tomorrow night, is you're going to see a lot of switching. And you're going to see that the Clippers are going to try and switch Rudy Gobert onto a guard. I think we saw a lot of that in the Dallas series with Boban. That was clearly their answer defensively. When Dallas was on defense, the LA Clippers switched Boban onto a guard, and the Clippers were able to leverage that.
Yeah.
The Utah Jazz clearly are a better defensive team than that. But here's the other thing that I think really matters. How many minutes a game are we going to get out of Derek Favors? Is he going to be able to play 10 minutes a game? Because it's going to be an interesting matchup here. I don't think you're going to see a lot of Zubats in this series. I don't. I think you're going to see a lot of Morris in the 4-5. I think you're going to see a lot of switching, and I think you're going to see a lot of physicality out of the forwards from the LA Clippers. And I just don't think that Derek Favors is going to be able to play a heavy minutes load and expect this Utah Jazz team to win this series.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you're the Clippers, you are, because of the lack of size, your mentality all season has been, hey, we're no matter what they have on the other side, whether we're talking Joel Embiid or just your average big, no matter what they have, we're going to play small. That is what this Clippers team is. And by doing that, you find that it's very simple for the big on the other side. Can the big make a jump shot? If the big can make a jump shot, it's going to be really difficult on the Clippers, because now you have a matchup problem. Now you have an advantage for that big. Now you've got issues, which is why Joel and Jokic and all these guys with jumpers eat against the Clippers. But if your big man doesn't have a jumper, a.k.a. Rudy Gobert, that problem is not really a problem, because at some point, you just have to say, okay, this guy can't shoot a jumper, so when he's setting screens, I don't have to worry about it. I don't. It's literally that simple. So when Don's trying to turn the corner in the pick and roll, I can sag. And what do I have to worry about with Rudy Gobert? Oh, that's right, I don't, which is why when the Jazz played Philly, we saw at the end of that game, Joel Embiid was essentially playing two guys at once and blocked multiple lob attempts to Rudy. And that's why I say, I love what Rudy brings to the table defensively. I love what he's able to do for this team, but in the postseason, he is a problem for this Jazz team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Frankly, I don't have a whole lot of confidence that the Jazz can protect the paint.
Mm-hmm.
It is the thing that really worries me most in this series. So let me get some of your comments. I see a lot of you in already this morning. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Our audio podcast had another record-setting week last week. Thank you to everybody on Stitcher, Apple, and Spotify. Those three platforms really power our podcast. Everybody on Stitcher, bless you. Hundreds and hundreds of listens come from Stitcher Radio every week on this show, and it's just very much appreciated. I want you to know that. I know, frankly, we talk a lot of YouTube on this show, and we're live on YouTube every morning. Obviously, it's our chosen platform. We're trying to get to 1,000. It's a really strong fit for us. But everybody who listens on the audio podcast, I want you to know I appreciate you. I am very thankful that you do that. I mean, that we do about 10,000 a week on this show. Mm-hmm. Not really trying to do 10,000 a week on it's amazing.
In listens.
Yeah, it's amazing how many. Oh yeah, I wish it was dollars. My God.
I just want to be clear.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But we do about 10,000 listens a week on this show. And I really appreciate that. You guys really support the show. Eric C says, first, ? Yes, finally, Eric. Congratulations. You're number one, brah. Vision Gaming 2011 says, hey, guys, Jazz Huddle says Jazz in 6 or 7. If the Jazz win this in 6 games, it would be a complete collapse out of the Clippers. That is a team that perseveres. That is a team that has deep, deep sea legs. I'd be really surprised, Jake, if they won in 6.
Yeah, and real quick, Jazz Huddle did DM me this morning on Instagram. He has subscribed to us and entered.
Hey, Jazz Huddle, what's up?
So thank
Appreciate
you, Jazz Huddle.
By the way, we have to give away this PS4. That's why it's sitting on the counter.
Yeah.
That's the donut giveaway.
Yep,
we'll announce that. Yeah, we'll announce that coming up in about 20 minutes. Vision Gaming says, did my Instagram post work? Well, I'm sure it did. If you tag the Monty Show and SLC Supercars, I'm sure it did. Hey, Flick Wolf, is that you?
Yeah,
is that you,
what
Flick
is your
Wolf?
name? Yeah,
I don't know your name on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I dropped the Instas in there. Just sent both of y'all DMs. Awesome, appreciate that. Jazz Huddle says, need Ingles to step up this series along with Clarkson. Clarkson's got to probably be 20 to 30 points a game.
Yeah.
Which he's very capable of doing. I think the Clippers very much are going to be in the mindset of, hey, we're going to let Donovan Mitchell, we know Donovan Mitchell's going to get his.
Yep.
We're going to try and limit that number 2 option. And if it's Jordan Clarkson, I think you live with Jordan Clarkson shooting threes. You know he's going to go through stretches where he's going to make 8 of 10, but then he's going to go through stretches where he's going to make 1 of 10.
He shoots 33% from 3. You're going to live with him shooting threes.
Yeah,
in fact,
I totally agree.
In fact, I would say defensively as a team, that's a win. I think that Jordan Clarkson is a hell of a scorer. I just think that he is a mid-range athletic kind of guy as a scorer. He's not he's not Trae Young bombing from 3
Totally
constantly,
agree.
So yeah, you'll live with it.
Sack Shea, good morning to you. He says Jazz in 6. How do you see the Jazz winning this in 6?
I think if the Jazz win it in 6, they got to win the first 2 games. They have to. You don't have a choice. You have to win both at home. And I think that my honest opinion is they're going to split at home. I think they'll win game 1. I think the Clippers will win game 2. And I think that the reason that's going to happen is because in game 1 they're going to come out and they're going to light the building on fire from 3. They're going to just
see. I think it's the other way around. My concern is the Jazz historically, recent times have not been great in openers.
Yeah,
and they're coming off of almost a full week of rest here, and I don't think that's a good thing. I mean, obviously Mike Conley needed it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a good thing that you haven't played a game in a week because your 3-point teams need to shoot 3-pointers.
Yeah.
And you can shoot them in practice, and I get it. You cannot replicate game intensity. You can't. And I think you see that with James Harden getting hurt in Brooklyn, who we're going to talk about in a minute. You cannot replicate in-game intensity. He lasted 47 seconds into game 1 of the playoffs.
Yeah.
To me, that's the biggest question: is can the Jazz come out intense in game 1? I mean, they're going to have on their darks. They're going to have on the dark floor and the dark uniforms, and
I don't have any.
The building's going to be lit.
I don't have any question so to me, I guess maybe we just believe 2 different things. I totally agree that shooters need to shoot. They need the in-game reps. They got to keep the feel alive. I totally agree with that. At the same time, though, part of me, another side of me, really feels like that. Having rested legs, this team's going to shoot the hell out of the ball. I think what we've seen is on the back-to-backs this season, they've shot the ball terribly. Now having a week off, that's totally different than having a couple days off. Totally different. But My feeling just is that they're going to be rested. They're going to come out. Even if they're missing shots, they're going to have a lot of energy. The crowd's going to be way into it. Like, it's that Vivint just tends to be this thing where the first 10, even 15 minutes of the game, the crowd is just on blast.
Well, it's the best home court advantage in the NBA.
Yeah, so
I mean,
the team feeds off of that. I don't know. My opinion is they're going to come out, they're going to win game 1, they're going to shoot 50% from 3, and then the Clippers are going to adjust, and that's when the series is going to start in game 2.
Well, I think if the Jazz come out like that in game 1, this could be a 6-game series. But I feel like the Clippers are in rhythm. They played well the last 2 games of this series. Kawhi Leonard is playing exceptional basketball. You're getting big contributions from guys like Luke Kennard. You're getting the 3-ball going down. I mean, I look at that game yesterday, and it is shocking that Marcus Morris has become an elite 3-point shooter. And for a guy that used to be an unintelligent basketball player and would just shoot everything in his area, this is a guy now who really has become a smart, calculated, efficient basketball player.
Yeah.
And he's a difference maker defensively. I look at some of these numbers, and you look at the fact that they got 20 from Morris, Kawhi, and PG. They got 13 off the bench from Terrence Mann, who's coming to life right before our eyes.
Terrence Mann is a nice young player.
Well, and they're giving him the ball and allowing him to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, he shoots essentially an air ball, and Kawhi goes in there and gets an unbelievable rebound for an and one.
Yeah.
I mean, they're allowing Terrence Mann to be comfortable. And by the way, he's already a pretty good defender.
Yeah.
So the thing that scares you about the Jazz, and for all of you that watch a ton of Jazz basketball, tell me I'm wrong. The Utah Jazz struggle with athletic wings that penetrate. And when those wings attack the basket, and when those wings go in there fearlessly like Kawhi and Paul George, and they kick to guys that make threes, the Jazz have no way to defend that because you don't have interior defense that can deal with system basketball. And if I look at Kawhi Leonard gets trapped on the baseline intentionally so he can kick that ball out because he's an elite passer with massive fingers. So he can pass that ball out. And you look at Paul George, really good mid-range player. You have to step to him, which gives space behind Rudy. Those are the things that worry me. I don't worry about the 3. These two teams are very equal in shooting threes. But man, that interior defense, I think it's make or break for the Jazz, Jake.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I just don't trust the Clippers yet. I don't trust them. Like, yes, I think they showed a lot of resiliency winning this series against Dallas, but I think Dallas had a lot of weaknesses as well that the Clippers were able to take advantage of. So I need to see. I don't know what it's going to take for me to trust the Clippers. Because they were up 3-1 last year and they blew a lead. This time they come back from a 2-0 deficit. Like, they're always in some sort of crazy situation. It can never just be a straightforward, clean-cut, series win for the Clippers. Like, and that's what worries me. This Jazz team is more than capable and more than willing to. Donovan Mitchell wants to crush your soul, legit. Like, he wants to end you, which is what he did to Dillon Brooks, which is what he did to Ja Morant. And I think that the Clippers cannot afford to mess around in this series. And so that's why I say I think the Jazz will come out and they'll win game 1 because I think they're going to shoot the hell out of the ball. And then in game 2, that's where things are going to start. Will the Clippers bounce back and win that game? If they win game 2, I think they win the series. If they lose both in Utah, well, now we're having a different conversation because I don't think you're coming back from a 2-0 hole against the Jazz. I just don't see that.
Yeah, Tyler says, here's a shocker. Monty says the Jazz are not good. Okay, well, I mean, I would like to thank you for decoding my messages and,
if you guys ever want to kick it, we'll flow.
I mean, we should just hang out. We're friends. I mean, that's amazing that you get me so it's such a solistic level that you're able to understand, that I think the Jazz aren't any good. So
I want more.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, get the fuck out. I mean, Tyler's the new co-host of the show. You're done.
You're so fucked.
I mean, get out. Yeah, because I think the Jazz are not good. Like,
my fucking ass.
Okay, well, all of a sudden, this is a cursing segment of the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tyler, I appreciate that you come in and stir the pot. I do. I think the Jazz are very good. I just happen to be a believer in the Clippers. I told you the other day, last week, the series was over. Clippers were winning this series. As soon as they went to Dallas and shot those, the lights out in those two games, and Kawhi dominated, you knew they were going to win that series.
Yeah, you just have a lot more faith in that team than I do.
But you know what I have faith in? I have faith in big players and big moments.
Yeah,
because
and Kawhi's clutch.
Kawhi is that guy.
That. He is clutch. He's hit multiple big time shots. He showed up, no doubt.
And the other guy that I think is really showing that he wants the moment is Marcus Morris. And I know I keep saying that name. He wants the moment. Mm-hmm. Now, he tends, like his brother, to shake a little bit. He passed up a wide open three when they were down one. I don't like that at all, right? But he's playing a pivotal role for them. And you know what I also like? I like that Ty Lue is willing to play, Ivica Zubac's 3 minutes yesterday. 3 total. In the entire game, Zubac played 3 minutes. Like, Ty Lue is actually evolving into a smart coach.
Yeah.
Let Boban dunk on you. Who cares? Did you notice at the later stages of that game, they were not even trying to defend Boban. Let Boban dunk on you. Cool. We have at one point they had an 8-point lead, and Boban dunked on them twice. So what did the Clippers do? They just came down, drove at the basket, kicked out, and Morris hit a 3. Okay, cool. Good job, Boban.
Yeah.
See you next year. Like,
it's
they're
and that's
smart.
why I say the Rudy thing is a real conversation in this series because of the way the Clippers play the game and because of the personnel that they have. I think that if I'm the Clippers, I'm going right after Rudy. Honestly, like I'm going in. I'm trying to get fouled early in the game, and that I think is something that could really change the tides in this series. If you can get Rudy Gobert in foul trouble, we've seen it very rarely. We've seen some teams do it.
Yep.
We've seen some teams go after Rudy, and when that happens, good things happen for the opposition to the Jazz. But most teams, for whatever reason, just don't try to attack Rudy Gobert, because when you get into his body, and this is what I love. Everybody says, oh, well, he's the best player in the league, and he blocked John Morant, and everything's cool with Rudy. The problem is when you get into Rudy Gobert's chest, when you get into his body, it's over. Rudy's not getting to that. Nobody's getting to that. And that's what I would hope to see out of these guys.
Yeah, and I think, listen, I again, all of this is predicated on Mike Conley playing, and we don't know. We have no update on Mike Conley as to what his status is, or health, better, worse, whatever. But I'm just going to believe that Mike Conley is going to be out there, and I think he's probably going to be limited. And that worries me quite a bit. And these are the things I think are leaning towards the Jazz. You have a really inconsistent guy in Paul George. The number 2 in Los Angeles is, if you want to talk about a guy I don't trust, it's Paul George. I just don't believe in Paul George.
Well, what is the difference between PG and the team themselves in performance? Like, what makes you trust the team and not trust Paul George?
Well, because you're getting consistent performances. Again, I hate to keep saying his name, but Marcus Morris is giving them. They're one of the. Do people realize that I think the LA Clippers were either 1 or 2 in 3-point efficiency this year. Mm-hmm. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the NBA, and I look at the level of performance out of Marcus Morris, and when they play well, he is a guy that impacts the game. And now in the Mavericks series, he was up and down. 23-6, 19-0. But when they need him to play well, because Paul George does not, he's there. And the thing that scares you is that they're going to play a completely different style than you saw against the Mavericks. You can almost throw out defensively everything the Clippers did in that series, because the Jazz are far more dynamic than the Dallas Mavericks. You're not going to see. I would be shocked if the Utah Jazz played any zone at all. I frankly, a coach that is getting no looks for his schematics is Rick Carlisle. I asked myself, What did you think was going to happen when you played zone against the LA Clippers? One of the better three-point shooting teams in the league. They routinely sent guards to the middle of the paint. The Mavericks collapsed on that guard, and the Clippers were getting open looks from three.
Yeah.
If you want to lose to the LA Clippers, go ahead and play zone. Because I'm telling you, the Jazz will not do that. The Jazz are good enough defensively that they will be able to defend the three-point line, but they're not good enough defensively to defend the mid-range in the paint. And that terrifies me.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not saying that the Clippers are outmatched in this series because they're not. I think these are two very even teams. I need to keep seeing the Clippers show up. Like that's my single biggest concern. And that's why I say this series has almost nothing to do with the Utah Jazz, because the Jazz are going to show up. They're going to do what they always do, which is they're going to shoot a ton of threes and they're going to play the percentages, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the question really is, okay, if you're going to live and die on the three, which this team does, we saw it in the Memphis series multiple times. When you live and die on the three and you're playing a team in the Clippers who has elite perimeter defense, I just think that's concerning. So,
but I'm telling you, and I hesitate to say it out loud. The Jazz defense is suspect. I worry about how crazy. I'm struggling to just.
We've talked about this before. Yeah.
I think we actually saw it against Memphis.
At times.
Memphis and the Clippers have the same type of bodies. If you think about it, they're not certainly the LA Clippers are nobody's going to claim that they're a big team. They don't have size. They don't. Their size plays perimeter. Like their size is not interior size.
They have size at position, yeah. Yeah.
So what that size is capable of doing is what worries me, because we saw Memphis's best offense was at the rim against the Jazz. It was not three balls. And I think what we saw against the Mavericks was a Clipper team that intentionally kicked the ball out because of how reactionary the Mavericks defense was.
Right.
If Rudy Gobert is going to adjust the way that they did in the Memphis series, and not to keep going backward, but Jazz fans, I think you realize, what Rudy Gobert did was he stopped lagging it to protect the rim, and he started stepping forward when Ja Morant got into the paint. And that altered the way that Morant was able to produce. Can you do that same thing against the Clippers? I would tell you cannot. Because the Clippers move far better away from the ball than Memphis does.
Yeah.
You're looking at professional basketball players. You're looking at baseline, a team that has baseline cuts built into their offense. Like this, the defense is going to struggle for the Jazz. There are going to be several, in my opinion, there are going to be several 40-point quarters. There are going to be several 35-point quarters out of the Clippers.
Right.
How do the Jazz answer that?
Yeah.
Because you cannot rely on defense if you're the Utah Jazz. And I know that sounds sensational or hot take Monty. But you can't rely on your defense if you're the Jazz, because it's not elite. It's good, it's not great.
Yeah, well the problem is their defense initiates the offense. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So like I think that I don't disagree with what you're saying, but here's the fact that I think that, if you're a Jazz fan, you can't get away from. This series is going to be decided by the Clippers. If the Clippers play elite perimeter defense like they're accustomed to, like
Which
they
will.
usually do, the Clippers are probably going to win the series, because I look at and go back on YouTube. Every Jazz game is on YouTube. You can go and find it. If you go back and you look at a lot of the looks that the Jazz are able to create offensively, they're wide open looks from three. I mean, those are wide open look. You think about the looks Niang gets. You think about some of the looks that Clarkson is able to get in the corner. You look at some of the looks that Bogey gets in the corner. I mean, these guys are knocking down just wide open looks by NBA standards. So if you think about, how good defensively the Clippers are, I just don't think the Jazz are going to see that many wide open looks. I think they're going to shoot a lot of contested threes, and I think that Rudy Gobert is going to have a ton of rebounds in this series.
I think that's exactly right. I agree with you 100%. Alexander Duque Good morning to you, sir. Do you think the Jazz being well rested while the Clippers tired from 7-game series is a big factor? But again, and this is a conversation that we should have.
Yeah.
Are you tired from 7 games, or are you just continuing the cycle? Because remember, you played more games in a compressed window, but there was no part of the Clippers that looked tired in the fourth quarter against Dallas.
No.
None. That team is in elite condition. And that's something we were specifically watching for. Will the Clippers fatigue mentally or physically? And I felt like they got sharper as the fourth quarter went on.
As the series went on.
You know what? Hell, I thought Atlanta got sharper as the fourth quarter went on yesterday.
Yeah.
I thought Brooklyn got better as the fourth quarter went on. I don't think in this particular season, with all the crazy COVID scheduling and stuff,
Yeah.
I actually don't think playing every other day is a bad thing. And I don't think 7-game series wear you out, especially early in the playoffs, the way that they would be historically when you've played 82, and then you play a first-round series and, now you're at your 90th game and you're just out of gas.
Yeah.
Load management, when everybody ripping NBA players for load managing, well, guess what? This is why you load manage.
Yep.
So that you're not out of gas. Kawhi Leonard's not out of gas.
No, he looks good.
Yeah, Paul George does not look out of gas. Morris, their guys look rested and ready. So I actually don't think I am the guy that the Jazz make me nervous early in series. They tend to come out in game ones and I think it takes them some time to find themselves. If that's the case tomorrow night, they're going to lose. Mm-hmm. They're going to lose game 1. And this is going to be a 7-game marathon.
And maybe the better way to say it is they can't afford to, in the Memphis series, Memphis would go on the 10 or 12-0 run or whatever, and then the Jazz would just run them down, and it wouldn't really be a big deal. That's not going to be the case in this series. When that happens, you're not just going to be able to run the Clippers down.
Well, but the interesting part about that those runs where those were answers to long Jazz runs. Mm-hmm. So the Jazz would be up 10, 12 points, and all of a sudden Dylan Brooks would be a dick, knock somebody over, and then go dunk on people. Right? All of a sudden, and all of a sudden, Memphis is on a 13-3 run. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to do that because the LA Clippers are not going to give you wide open threes because they're panicking defensively.
Right.
Because the LA Clippers don't weak side protect.
Yeah.
They're a man defense team.
Yep.
So you're not getting George Niang comes to mind. Mm-hmm. George, how many open looks did George Niang have in the Memphis series?
Tons.
Well, I doubt that's going to happen here.
To the point where we talked about him missing open shots.
Yeah. Louis Diaz, good morning to you, sir. He says Jazz in 6, guarantee.
Everybody wants the Jazz in 6. That's the sexy pick, and I'm telling you, that's not what this series is going to be.
He says, who want to bet? I'm poor guy from Manila, but this one's on Bucks, LOL. Love that. Love you, Louis Diaz. By the way, the Philippines and Japan, I love you guys. You're all about this podcast. We have so many listeners we gave away a PS5 to one of our listeners in Manila. Shar, in Manila. You guys are amazing, and we really appreciate you guys being here, by the way. We also appreciate Swiderski. So Kawhi alone can't win, he says.
Well, here's the thing. Kawhi's not alone.
Yeah. You are not alone.
Okay. No.
Kennard is here with you.
I'm Shiva, the god of death.
Yeah, I'll never sing again. Can you name that song?
No.
It's You Are Not Alone by Michael Jackson. Duh.
Nice.
By the way, he's dead.
Okay.
Whatever. The Jazz Huddle says, I'm guessing Mike is going to miss game 1 and 2. Jazz Huddle, I actually agree with you on that. I think Mike Conley doesn't play tomorrow night. And even if he does, I think Quinn Snyder's one of his best assets is he is tuned into his players.
Yeah.
And I think he really understands. Mike Conley's a proud man. If you walk up to Mike Conley right now and say, hey, can you give us 25, 30 minutes tomorrow night? Yes, absolutely.
Here's the deal. I'm the best there is.
I think Quinn Snyder's smarter than that. I think if you're the Utah Jazz, you're planning for a 7-game series.
Yeah.
You have to plan for a longer series. Mike Conley's much more important 4, 5, 6, 7 than 1. So I would almost, if he plays, he'll be very limited. That's what I would say. Jackson says 1,000 subscribers. You guys are almost there. Congrats. Thank you. Appreciate that. 991.
Let's go.
Let's see. Swiderski says PG is unstable. I'd agree with that. Driftwood, Jazz aren't the Mavs, and the Clippers are on no rest, and they had to grind out a 7-game series. Again, I'll just revert to my previous comment. Swiderski says Morris will not play 25 points per game. I don't think he will, but I don't think they need him to put up 25.
I think Morris is going to be on Bogdanovich, and I think Morris will have his way because Bogdanovich is not a good defender. And I think that that's going to get exposed in this series.
My question is, at what point does Paul George step up?
Well, what does stepping up look like? I mean, the guy had a big series against the Mavericks.
Yeah, but the thing, and I tweeted this yesterday, what does that mean? Paul George was a 0 in the first half of that game.
Well,
and you blink, and it's like, well,
say?
He's got 20 points. We're in the fourth quarter. And he winds up with 23 whatever points it was.
Yeah, and I think he had a double-double. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Paul George scores points. There ain't no doubt about that. I mean, I'm open to the conversation. But at some point, he's got to be. He'll never be on par with Kawhi Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, he's got to be a guy where you're like, yeah, we can expect to get more than 22 points. 10 boards, in
double.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the biggest Paul George guy, but he's, again, what did Kawhi have? Didn't Kawhi have 35 or whatever it was? I mean, Kawhi's getting a lot of the ball.
He is getting a lot of the ball. I agree. I don't disagree with it at all. I just think I look at Paul George yesterday. You're right. 22 and 10. Kawhi Leonard, 28, 9 assists, 4 steals, 10 rebounds.
On Paul George's line, though, how many shots did it take? What was his efficiency?
2 of 8 from 3, 5 of 15 total, 10 of 10 from the line, 6 boards, 10 dimes.
So he didn't really shoot that well. I mean, he made his living from the line.
He's not shooting well at all.
Yeah.
He's not shooting well at all. And I don't know. If Paul George wants a legacy, now's the time to claim it. Like, he has got to become something, because right now he's nothing. Well,
he's gonna get a chance in this series. I mean, he is.
What do the matchups in this series look like?
Patrick Beverley on Donovan Mitchell.
I don't know what Pat Bev's status is, by the way, because he hasn't played very much at all.
Yeah, he didn't really play in the Mavericks series.
And I know that he had been. He was healthy. Ibaka is still doubtful with that back. I think Serge Ibaka is another one. That's a huge deal. But it'll be interesting to see. I wonder, how does Rudy Gobert, what's the Rudy Gobert matchup in this series?
There isn't one. That's the thing. There's not one. Rudy Gobert is going to play the whole team. It just depends on what the defensive set looks like. That's what I'm saying. There's not going to be. It's like, any team that plays small doesn't really care what the big is going to do unless the big can shoot the basketball. I know I keep saying that, but truly, it is a defining factor simply because if your big can get his own bucket, now you've got problems because he's 6'10" or he's 7 foot and can shoot right over you. But again, and I don't like that this conversation typically turns into the bashing of Rudy Gobert because it really has nothing to do with that. It's more just looking at, okay, Rudy is not an offensive player. He sets picks and he rebounds. That's it. There's no elbow jumper. He struggles to finish around the rim. I'd be more than willing to play hack a Gobert with him at the free throw line. Honestly, you don't have to worry about Rudy, and that's the thing. That's why I say, you don't have to play Zubats. Play small. Move.
And you disagree with me on this guy, but I'm telling you, Nicholas Batum makes a difference for that team.
Well, what we disagreed on is you had said that Batum was a better defender or had been a better defender on Luka than Kawhi was, and I just
no. What I said was that they didn't have to spend all of Kawhi's energy because Nick Batum was an effective defender, which was allowing them to get Kawhi onto Tim Hardaway Jr. To make his shot inconsistent. what they were doing essentially was putting Nick Batum in game 5 and 6 on Luka Doncic for longer stretches to get Kawhi off of that. And then in the back half of 6 and a good part of 7, which by the way, Doncic put up 46 points.
Yeah, any doubt that they need a number 2?
Yeah, they do.
Like
in Dallas. But my point is, Batum is giving them contributions. The question for the Clippers is going to be, does DeMarcus Cousins play a role in this series?
No.
Does Patrick Beverley play a role in this series? Because I think Patrick Beverley's just out of the rotation. In games 1 and 2, he was awful. So will he? But what we saw when the Clippers beat the Jazz earlier this year was they routinely got Rudy Gobert out of the paint by switching him on to Patrick Beverley.
Yeah.
And then Beverley knocked down 2 corner threes on him.
Yeah, Beverly's going to play in this series. I have no doubts about it. I think you're going to see him. He's going to do what he always does. He's going to be the annoying little brother on the floor that's going to foul you and be a pest and frustrate you, and that's exactly what I think they want as a starting. They want Patrick Beverley to start this series out on Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, and try to frustrate him and try to get him out of his element. And then when he gets going, they'll switch Kawhi or PG onto him and just go from there.
The other question that I have is, what do you get out of Joe Ingles in this series? Because if we're talking about matchups, where does Joe Ingles fit?
This is very simple. Very simple.
They need him defensively.
Right.
They need him.
Right. Does Mike Conley play or not?
Well,
Mike Conley plays. Joe Ingles is fine. Joe Ingles has the exact matchup he needs. He'll get his shots. Everything will be cool. Mike Conley doesn't play. Okay, we're having a different conversation now.
Yeah, Sean Mierzinski says Jazz in 5 or 6.
Dude, I don't think you guys respect the Clippers enough. I'm seeing way too much Jazz in 6 talk. Jazz in 5 talk is just, that's just not realistic.
Yeah, I think that, when you get the adjustments that Ty Lue made in that Mavericks series, which were far less Rondo, way more Kennard, way more man, and you're starting to see that those paid dividends. Terrence Mann's athletic ability at the rim absolutely made a difference in Game 6 and 7. You see less Patrick Beverley. You see more from Kennard. Kennard hit 3 incredible threes in that game yesterday that were difference-making, and I could argue those threes that Kennard hit were the first 2 were absolutely 2 of the biggest in the entire season for the Clippers, because there were times where that game was in the balance. Now, I never felt like the Mavericks were going to win that game, but there were times where it was, 3-point lead, 4-point lead. Kennard hits it, it's an 8-point lead. Like, they just extended the lead. And I think those are the threes you have to avoid, because your big guys are going to make those threes. I think guys like Kawhi Leonard are going to knock that down. I think Paul George is going to be an elite mid-range player. You've got to stop the Kennards and the Mans.
Yeah.
But those are the guys that are easy to leave standing in the corner. That's why George Niang is always so damn open, because teams don't respect him. I think you should really pay attention to how this thing goes. I want to see how the Jazz come out and match up. Is Joe Ingles the guy that you're going to put on Paul George? Because I don't know who. Well, who else are you going to put on him?
I don't know, but you can't put Joe Ingles on Paul George.
Oh, I think you can.
No,
and
Paul
I think
George
Joe
will eat him up.
I think Joe has the length and the footwork to compete with anybody in this league.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree. I think Paul George is a superior offensive player too.
But who are you going to match up with?
I don't know what the answer is. Mike Conley needs to play. That's the answer. Mike Conley needs to play, and this is why I say, again, this is why I get frustrated with the Jazz, because we shouldn't be having this conversation. There's nobody in their right mind is putting, what is he, 33, Joe Ingles, or whatever he is?
64. He's 64 years old.
Nobody's putting Joe Ingles on one of the best scorers in the league, dude. I respect Joe. Joe's got a nice defensive game. He can play defense. There's no doubt. But you're not putting him on. You're not putting him on one of the best athletes in the league, dude. That's a recipe for disaster, honestly. And by the way, if you think that the Clippers are going to play straight up one-on-one on the wing, you're wrong. They're going to move the ball, and they're going to take advantage of Rudy Gobert on the perimeter. That's what they're going to try and do. So Joe Ingles aside, like I think that's really what's going to happen. They want to get Paul George or Kawhi Leonard on Rudy Gobert and away from the rim. They're going to drive by him. They're then going to kick, and they're going to knock the shot down. That's the game plan. That's what they're going to try and do.
Yeah, and I think the lessons we learned about the Clippers in that Mavericks series is they score. They do just fine when their three ball doesn't go in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is this. I don't mean to repeat myself, but again, the Clippers came out and rebounded well, got out on the fast break, and started attacking the mid-range. And that all happened because they weren't shooting well. Well, what happens when you attack the mid-range? Well, all of a sudden you start shooting better.
Yeah.
So it's just there were a lot of adjustments in this series. Don't sleep on the Clippers. It is not accidental that they are here.